Everyone. So, Perfect Crown episode 12 delivers exactly the kind of finale fans of emotional royal K dramas usually hope for. Heartfelt romance, political closure, betrayal, sacrifice, and ultimately a satisfying sense of freedom for nearly every major character. Rather than ending as simple a fairy tale monarchy romance, the series closes by arguing that true happiness comes from letting go of power and choosing ordinary human connection instead. The finale begins with Ian finally ascending the throne after everything he endured throughout the series. But instead of embracing royal authority, he immediately reveals to Hiju that he intends to abolish the monarchy once the nation stabilizes. That decision becomes the emotional and political core of the episode because it transforms Ian from someone trapped by royal duty into someone actively trying to free both himself and the country from the system altogether. Of course, not everyone supports that vision. John Woo strongly opposes dismantling the monarch and begins rallying members of royal family against Ian. At the same time, Irang discovers that Jinhu was secretly responsible for the deadly council hall explosion, finally exposing the full intent of his betrayal. The reveal carries extra emotional weight because Jibung wasn't just another political enemy, he was Ian's closest friend. That betrayal became one of the finale's strongest emotional themes. The episode repeatedly emphasizes how devastating it is when trust collapses between people who once deeply cared for each other. Jinwoo's downfall feels tragic precisely because the series spent so much time building his connection with Ian earlier in the story. Even though the review notes that his exposure happens somewhat too quickly, the emotional idea behind it lands effectively. Meanwhile, Hiju proves once again why she is arguably the emotional backbone of the entire series. When Jun Wong freezes the royal budget in an attempt to pressure Ian politically, Hiju and her family refuse to back down. Castle Group steps in financially to support the royal family, and then Hiju publicly exposes Jinwoo during a royal meeting using evidence recorded by Erang. That moments allow EU to shine once again in the role. According to the review, EU's performance throughout the finale perfectly balances emotional vulnerability with quiet strength. Hiju has consistently been a character fighting for identity and self worth beyond the stigma of being labeled an illegitimate child. uh, and the finale gives her the chance to fully step into her own power emotionally and politically. Byeon Woon Suk also reportedly delivers one of his strongest performances as Ian. The finale leans heavily into the exhaustion and emotional burden of leadership, and Woo Seok effectively portrays a young man who never truly wanted the throne but still accepts responsibility for changing the country's future. One of the most interesting choices the finale makes is allowing the people themselves to decide the monarchy's fate. Instead of clinging to royal power, Ian opens the decision to public vote. The nation ultimately chooses to abolish monarchy entirely, symbolizing not just political change but emotional liberation for almost every character. And honestly, that's what the finale is really about: freedom. Nearly every major character spends the series trapped by some form of expectation, guilt, status, or emotional burden. Hiju wants freedom from the label attached to her birth. Ian wants freedom from royal responsibility. Irang eventually realizes she needs freedom from greed and ambition. Even the citizens themselves are given the chance to break away from a system that defined their lives for a generation. The finale reportedly handles that theme surprisingly well by showing freedom not as loneliness or chaos, but as the ability to financially live authentically. That idea becomes especially clear during the final time jump set 3 years later. Rather than ending with grand palace celebration or continued royal luxury, the series show Ian and Hiju living ordinary lives surrounded by loved ones. The sport event sequence and final scene intentionally contrast with the rigid, emotionally restrained atmosphere of the place earlier in the show. Visually, the finale apparently shifts into brighter, warmer imagery to reinforce that emotional transformation. Ordinary life becomes a reward. The absence of royal hierarchy becomes a true happy ending. The supporting cast also receives strong praise. No Sang Hoon effectively portrays Jin Woon's darker side despite initially appearing harmless and trustworthy, while Gon Seon Yoon leaves a strong impression as Irang, particularly through her emotional growth by the finale. The review does acknowledge some flaws. The political conflict fully exposure reportedly resolved a little too quickly for material that carried such emotional importance throughout the season. Still, Perfect Crown ultimately prioritizes romance and emotional satisfaction over a hardcore political realism. The rushed resolution apparently doesn't damage the overall experience too heavily. By the end, the series transforms from a glamorous royal romance into something more grounded and human. The final message is surprisingly simple: power, title, status matter less than genuine connection and personal freedom. And that's why the finale seems to resonate emotionally. Instead of presenting monarchy as a fantasy to preserve forever, Perfect Crown chooses to let its character walk away from power in order to finally live fully as themselves. Thank you for watching. Bye.